Hello everyone, welcome to this new episode of Bitcoin versus S&P 500 versus cash. In this video, we're going to review the week's performance of our different assets. Here's the principle. Twice a week, I do a DCA, putting $20 into the S&P 500, $20 into Bitcoin, and $20 into cash. Aside from the fact that this is, all things considered, a pretty solid portfolio, I'll also remind you of the interest of these different assets. And this lets us watch the competition week after week, which will perform best between Bitcoin, cash, and the S&P 500. Honestly, I'm pretty sure that in the long run, cash will be the worst performer. Between Bitcoin and the S&P 500, my thesis is that Bitcoin will keep outperforming. But I'm invested in the S&P 500 because maybe I'm in a bubble of optimism when it comes to Bitcoin. There's one thing about Bitcoin that worries me. When I listen to Michael Saylor, his story is great, a CEO of a software company that was just getting by, deciding to do something bigger, and turning his company into one whose sole purpose is to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. His strategy is interesting, but there's a blind spot in his reasoning. He often says Bitcoin is an improved version of gold. I agree. It's more liquid, no need to verify authenticity, no custody fees, minimal transaction fees, easier to cross borders with, easier to use as cash, and currently has better performance. But in the same way that Bitcoin can disrupt gold, couldn't there be a technological evolution one day that makes Bitcoin obsolete? That's why, while I'm very bullish on Bitcoin and think it's one of the best investments today, I believe a balanced portfolio should still have S&P 500 exposure. As for cash, the idea is to have an income you can actually spend on bills, food, fun, without selling Bitcoin or breaking the compounding effect of the S&P 500. If cash works at a good yield, it's not bad. So let's start with cash. I deposited on this DeFi platform. Right now I have $60 earning 7.24%, which has generated 7 cents so far. Small sums, but they'll grow quickly. This is part of my journey to becoming a crypto millionaire. The key indicator here is inflation. US inflation is at 2.7%, so if you hold cash in dollars, you lose purchasing power. Here, I'm beating inflation. Not by much, but it works. High inflation has different short-term and long-term effects. Long-term, it's good for investors because you want to hold as little idle cash as possible and more inflation-resistant assets like Bitcoin and the S&P 500. Short-term, high inflation makes it harder for the central bank to cut rates, because rate hikes are the usual tool to fight inflation. This is why, despite Trump wanting rate cuts before the elections to boost markets, the Fed may not do it. Rate cuts make borrowing cheaper, pump money into markets, and push stock prices up. So, short-term, high inflation can spook markets. Long-term, it's bullish for investors, bearish for those holding cash idle. Now, asset performance. Bitcoin hit a new all-time high in dollars this week before pulling back. Maybe just normal market breathing. Year-to-date, plus 30%, a very strong performance. S&P 500 also had a good week. Year-to-date, plus 10%, which is exactly its historical average. Already a great year if you're invested. Both Bitcoin and S&P 500 crush inflation, and if you place your cash smartly, you can beat inflation there too. Looking at the portfolio, S&P 500 has outperformed Bitcoin this week, with Bitcoin down since Monday's DCA. Right now, S&P 500 is king, Bitcoin in second place. Cash is trash. For now. But the goal for cash is slow and steady growth, so that when the next crash comes, I'll be glad to have it. Now let's do our DCA. $20 into the S&P 500, $20 into Bitcoin, $20 into decentralized banking for yield. Today's portfolio, biggest share in the S&P 500, 0.007 Bitcoin, on our way to a full Bitcoin one day. See you Monday for the next update. Make sure to subscribe if you want to follow that journey, and don't hesitate to ask all your questions. I would be glad to answer. Have a great weekend. Take care.